Buying a flat in London in your 20s is not impossible, and I'm gonna show you how I did it. Fact is that the housing market is broken, salaries aren't keeping up with inflation, and it really shouldn't be this hard to own a home. But since it is, I wanted to share what worked for me, just in case it helps even one person to buy a flat in London. Context is key. Context matters so much when talking about money and anything related to money, like buying a flat. So I'm turning 30 this year, and we bought this flat when I was 28, so almost 2 years ago now, which is crazy. And this is a 2-bedroom flat in East London, and I bought this property together with my partner. Before buying this place, we'd been renting in London for, I want to say, 4 years, and during that time we had to move multiple times, different reasons like landlord selling the place, or we were just outpriced. The final straw for us was when our last flat increased their rent by £500, which is just bonkers, and it's just like a jump that we couldn't do. We were just sick of having to move all the time, not having the security of, you know, knowing what your rent is going to be like for the next few years. So we were just sick of it, and yeah, we started the buying process. And I won't go into the entire buying process, although that is quite an interesting topic. Let me know if you're interested in that. It was quite surprising to me because I'm obviously not British, I'm from Germany, so the buying process did surprise me a bit in the UK, but let me know if you want to hear more about this and I'll do a separate video. Also, just when talking about our background and how we did this, we did not receive financial help from our parents. I think if you do get financial help from your parents, that's great. We did not. We paid for everything ourselves, which we're very proud of, and it was a hard journey, I'm not going to lie. I think the guideline is 10% of the asking price, which in our experience, people always wanted more than that. So I think the more you can save for your deposit, the better, and it will just put you in a better position to negotiate. And also it would be a shame if that would potentially cost you the property that you really want because your deposit isn't high enough. So I would say save as much as you can. Also to pay for like the solicitor and all of that, which were definitely costs that you have to plan in because they're pretty high. My biggest tip for saving for deposit, and this is how we were able to buy this flat, is having multiple income streams. For about 3 years I worked full-time, and I also worked part-time as a freelancer. Just for context, I work in marketing and I previously worked as a journalist, and while I had marketing jobs I also freelanced as a journalist on the side. It was a lot of work. It's not nice coming home from your 9 to 5 and then having to put extra shifts into your part-time job. And to be fair, a chunk of that time was during COVID, so not much else was going on, but still, like, you definitely have to have quite like a good work ethic to make that work. And I know you might not technically be allowed to do this in your contract. I wasn't either. Obviously don't work during your work hours, work before or after. I picked up weekend shifts, for example. Sometimes I even worked during my holidays from my 9 to 5 job. I then worked for my part-time job when I had time off, which again is not ideal, but this is how I was able to save quite a lot of money pretty quickly. And my partner is in a similar boat, so he works in music, full-time 9 to 5 job in London, and then he also manages an event company, self-employed. He's done that for many years, and that's also another income stream that he has. For both of us, that money from our additional income streams goes straight into our savings, and that's the main reason why we were able to save for our deposit. I'm starting off with this because, in all honesty, if you live in London and you have an average 9 to 5 job with like a normal salary, it's gonna be really hard to save for a deposit. Even if you do nothing, like let's say half of your salary goes straight into savings, which is obviously not realistic because then you wouldn't be able to live your life. Even then you would kind of struggle. So for me personally, unless you make a lot of money, I didn't really see a way around this, and I just want to emphasize again, I don't think it should be like this. I think our salaries should be enough to be able to save, but I think the reality for a lot of people in London is that that's not the case. So you have to kind of make that reality work for you, right? But yeah, I just wanna say that, like, I don't think it's necessarily like healthy or good to like have another job on top of your job. I really believe in money transparency, especially for women, and I just think oftentimes we wonder how people afford certain things, and I don't know. I just want to tell you that I did this by having a part-time job. I think honestly you can do this multiple ways. Like, as I said, for me obviously it was kind of easy because I was already, you know, a trained journalist in that sense, so it was quite easy for me to pick up freelance shifts on the weekends or, you know, after or before work. Especially if you work in like a news environment, often people are needed in the mornings or evenings or weekends when their like normal staff doesn't necessarily want to work. So it's quite easy to pick up those shifts that no one wants. You could do this by maybe picking up shifts in hospitality. Maybe you could work as a waitress on the weekends, or you could work in a coffee shop on the weekends. I also, for example, I worked at a festival just putting wristbands on people. There's definitely ways you can make extra money on the side. I would also recommend platforms like Upwork and Fiverr for freelance work. If you speak, for example, another language like me, I did quite a lot of German translation work. I think there are definitely ways to have other income next to your 9 to 5. I will say, not to like honk my own horn or whatever you say in English, I am very like disciplined when it comes to money. That might be the German in me, I don't know. But basically what I do, 40% of my income goes into my rent, which is bonkers. If you don't live in London, you're gonna be like, oh my god, that's crazy. Which I do agree with, it is crazy, but you know, if you live in London, you get it. I think most of us pay 40-50% for our rent. That's just what it is. If you want to be in London or a city like London, then that's probably your reality, and it is what it is. 10% covers my bills, so you know, this would obviously be electricity, Wi-Fi, all of that. So 50% of my income is gone, and then 20% of my income goes straight into savings. Then around 30% is for spending, so that's like all my leisure money, I would say. And I used this budgeting approach when I was saving for a deposit, but honestly I kind of still live by it. I think it's quite like a good way to distribute your money, I suppose. And then I also use sinking funds. These are sort of separate saving pots for expenses that I know are coming, like Christmas or birthday gifts or holidays. You save small amounts, like let's say £50 a month throughout the year. When that time comes, when for example you have to pay for holiday or, you know, all the Christmas presents, it doesn't just hit you in that month. You kind of like distribute the money over like the previous months as well to kind of level it out. And I think that's really smart. I have like multiple sinking funds going on. How I fund those sinking funds is by taking money from my leisure money, so from those 30%. I do not touch my savings. Like, my saving money is gone, never see it again. Keep different accounts. So I have different accounts for my sinking pots, for my sort of long-term savings, and then for my spending money. I literally have like 3 bank accounts from 3 different banks, and that's just what works for me. As I said, all the money I make as a freelancer goes into my long-term savings. 20% of my salary goes into my long-term savings, and I just don't see that money ever. And I would even go as far as saying delete that banking app so you can't use it. That's just what works for me. I think out of sight, out of mind. When it comes to sort of my lifestyle spending, I obviously made some choices that enabled me to save for a deposit, and I think one very important one is to avoid lifestyle inflation. Whenever I got a pay rise or earned more money for some reason, I put those money into my savings and not into sort of my leisure spending. And that meant I was saving more without sort of sacrificing as much. For example, like rather than spending 100 more on shopping, I would rather put that into my savings pot and work less outside of my 9 to 5, which I, by the way, don't do anymore, just to emphasize. I only work my 9 to 5 now because I have achieved the goal of buying a flat. I don't use Klarna credit cards, anything like that. That might also be like a cultural thing. As I said, I am German, and I feel like in Germany the mentality is very much like, if you can't afford it, you're not gonna have it. I would say we have a more conservative approach to debt. It's not very common in Germany to take out loans, especially for young people. It's just not a thing. I think it's also pretty hard to do. I don't think they would just give you loans in Germany, but I think that's good. I think young people are more protected in Germany from like debt. I think in the UK it's quite common to take out loans when you're young. Maybe you didn't really know what you were doing at the time, and then you're just paying off that debt for a very long time. So I think that's very dangerous. And yeah, as I said, I don't do that at all. My only debt I have is my mortgage. Because it's kind of like fitting for the context. But if you're German, my family calls me geizig, which is the German word for being like frugal or even like stingy. Stingy, I think that's how you say it. Because I've always been very like money conscious, and I do have to say that I also have a healthy portion of like money anxiety. I think like I've always felt really uncomfortable not having savings. I'm just not someone to overspend because I can't actually enjoy that. It just gives me anxiety and fear. So I think it naturally came quite easy to me to save because I just feel more safe and comfortable to have like a safety blanket, I suppose. To my point of being geizig, I just think you have to do you. Like, even if people call you like geizig or stingy or whatever, especially if they make more money than you, I absolutely hate that. If someone like makes double my salary, let's say lives in a small German town, and tells me I'm being too stingy, I'm like, bro, like we're not playing the same game. Like we don't have the same money to spend. Them spending £100 for a taxi might not make a dent in their bank account, but maybe for you it does. So I think you do you, and you know what you're saving for, you know your budgets. I would just say stick to it and don't let outside noise influence you. Sometimes you have to make yourself uncomfortable, and you have to be okay with being more uncomfortable in order to stick to your budget. For example, you have two choices, like you have to take a £10 airport bus which takes 90 minutes, or you can take a taxi for 40 minutes but it costs like £80. When I was saving for the deposit, never ever would I pick the taxi option. I took the bus, and very often I made uncomfortable decisions, or like decisions that put me into like an uncomfortable spot, but I was okay with that. You know, you do always have to sacrifice something. It's either time, energy, or you have to sacrifice financially. And while I was saving for the deposit, my mindset was very much like, okay, I'm gonna sacrifice my time, I'm gonna sacrifice my energy, but I'm not going to budge sort of on the financial aspect, because that's what I prioritized at the time. And I say at the time because now that I've achieved my goal of like buying a flat, I'm way more like lenient now, and now I prioritize more my time and my energy, and I would rather spend more to get somewhere. But at the time I just had different priorities, and I think that's fine. And I think also when you make those decisions, just keep in mind that's not going to be you forever. That's just you for a certain time in your life before you're able to, you know, save the amount you want to save. Other things I don't do is like taking public transport very often. I cycle everywhere if I can. I've never had my nails done, which is actually like a fun fact about me. Yeah, as I said, like I've never got my nails done, but to be fair, that's more just because I prefer natural nails. But just like I don't really have a lot of like monthly expenses like that. The only thing I regularly pay for is Spotify, and then also my gym. Those are the only things I pay for. All of that said though, in terms of lifestyle choices, I want to be very clear. I don't think you can't afford to buy a flat in London because you get your nails done or get takeaway coffee. That's not the point at all. As I said before, the main reasons why housing is inaccessible for many people are systemic, completely outside of our control and how we spend our money. Obviously those tips are not going to solve like the housing crisis, but I do think that, you know, a lot of things are out of our control, and the only thing we can control is how much money we make, how we budget that money, how we spend that money, and how much we save. Sadly, that's just the only thing in our control right now, and this is why I'm sharing my tips. But I just want to be very clear. I don't think that we can't buy flats or afford properties because we're buying avocados. Like, please. Let's move on from that narrative, because it's not true at all, and I don't think that. So I just want to say that. So yeah, there you have it. I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm really happy to help. As I said, I do really believe in money transparency, and I really want to help. So let me know if you have any questions, and I hope I'll see you in the next video.